Hello, this is an accidental vagabond. Like and subscribe. This is the U.S.A. road trip series, and if you're interested in seeing any of the other videos, check the links below in the description. Welcome to the South Dakota to Iowa portion of the drive. The day before, we had driven across Montana, and we didn't get into South Dakota until 10 p.m. It was too dark for us to make it to our reserved campsite in the Black Hills, and to my great disappointment, we had to find somewhere else to stay. Luckily, we found a place that allowed dogs. It was an overpriced, obnoxious 5-story casino hotel, but it gave us the rest we needed. My husband, the sole driver of the trip, appreciated the bed and shower, and Penny the dog appreciated it too. Black Hills campsite will just have to be put on the wish list. Now introducing Accidental Vagabond's Travel History Cliff Notes.
Let's go.
Deadwood, South Dakota. Deadwood was established in 1876 during the Black Hills Gold Rush. The town filled with prospectors, gamblers, and legendary figures like Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane. According to the stories, Hickok only lived in Deadwood for a few weeks before he was shot in the back, so you could say Hickok died in Deadwood. Yet it wasn't called Deadwood because of how many people died there. It got its name from all the dead trees found in the gulch by the early prospectors and settlers. Now, for me, driving through the historic town of Deadwood, it was hard to not feel a mythic nostalgia for the days of rugged cowboys and daring outlaws. The stories of the great American West are pretty ingrained in me. My grandmother often told tales of my great-great-grandfather, a Texas Ranger, who supposedly crossed paths with the infamous Billy the Kid. My mother, a fan of classic Western movies, further fueled this romanticized vision of the Wild West. And I loved Young Guns when I was a teenager. Deadwood is a living relic of that era. Although it seems pretty overrun with casinos, even the Starbucks has a casino connected. My mom loved casinos though, so she would have loved Deadwood. But this land, the Black Hills, was originally home to the Lakota Sioux. I should say legally home to the Lakota Sioux. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 had granted the Black Hills to the Lakota people in perpetuity. Perpetuity. I have such a hard time saying the word, but I know that the meaning is forever. But when gold was discovered by Custer, the U.S. government seized the Sacred Hills through outright violation of the agreement. Prior to the discovery of the gold, settlers were already engaging in illegal occupation of the land. Before the U.S. government broke the treaty, the cycle went a bit like this. Settlers and prospectors would occupy Lakota territory. The Lakota would then raid the settlements, and then the U.S. government would come in, and instead of telling the settlers, this is Lakota land, they protected the settlers from the Indian raids, and then they would send in more troops to explore for gold. But the truth was, it was legally Lakota land protected by a signed treaty and broken like every other treaty with the native tribes of America. A familiar story to what we can see happening in the West Bank today. To this day, the Lakota tribe refuses to accept the monetary compensation placed in a trust by the Supreme Court in 1980. An acknowledgement, by the way, from the Supreme Court that the Black Hills were illegally taken by the U.S. government. The Lakota people said, the land is not for sale. They want the land, not the money. The mythologized Wild West was built upon the dispossession of native peoples and the systematic breaking of every single treaty forged with indigenous tribes. In every old story, it was the Americans versus the savages. It was the same for the Crow and the Northern Cheyenne. It was the same everywhere in America. Only, unlike the Lakota, those other tribes didn't have the Supreme Court acknowledge that their land was taken illegally. Acknowledged, but still ignored. If you want to learn more about this important part of American history, check the links below. Now, I haven't seen the show Deadwood yet, but from what I've heard, from what people have told me about the show, it seems that the real savages were a majority of the whites. South Dakota, the Mount Rushmore State. The capital of South Dakota, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, is Pierre. And the highest point is Black Elk Peak at 7,242 feet, or 2,207 meters. and the largest city is Sioux Falls.
Woo!
For our South Dakota to Iowa drive, we started on the road at 9 a.m. Once we passed through Deadwood, around 9:40, we headed east. We turned on Highway 14A towards Sturgis, and that is when the real drive began. At Sturgis, we got back on Interstate 90, which we drove until we reached Fairmont, Minnesota. In Fairmont, we turned onto Highway 15 and headed south into Iowa. You may have noticed all the bug guts on the windshield. I must apologize. It was just really too difficult to keep up with keeping the windshield clean during this drive, and it was so hot outside that we kept the windows up so that we could survive. I mean, it was really that hot. I think it got up to maybe 103 degrees. So yes, there's a lot of footage taken through the front windshield with a lot of nasty bug guts. So I do apologize for that. As the Black Hills faded into the distance behind us, the land before us began to flatten like a green blanket. The difference between planning a road trip and actually being on the road trip are two very different things when it comes to time, especially when you have a dog. The drive from Deadwood, South Dakota to Sioux City, Iowa was supposed to take 7.5 hours, but it took 12. When you're traveling with a dog, you have to pull over more often. Then there's traffic, weather, construction, missed turns or junctions. So many things can happen that can turn your reasonable 7.5-hour drive into an unreasonable 12-hour drive. In fact, most of our drives took between 9 to 12 hours, although they had all been planned as 8-hour max driving days. And if you might remember from the previous videos, my husband was the only one with a license. In the mid-20th century, the post-World War II economic boom led to increased car ownership among American families. The car became a symbol of freedom and independence, and road trips became the thing to do for families. And there was this cultural fascination with novelty and entertainment. Whitwam's wigwams, seen here at the Cheyenne River rest stop, were created in the mid-20th century as part of the explosion in roadside attractions designed to draw in travelers during the peak of the American road trip era. The site was developed by Clarence Whitwam, and the large concrete teepees were built to capture the attention of passing motorists and hopefully cause them to stop and take a look. The wigwams are not authentic Native American structures. They do not represent Native Americans as much as they represent mid-20th century Americans' fascination with Native American motifs during that period. People were drawn to quirky, unique, and unusual attractions that offered a break from the monotony of long drives. So with the boom of the car and the family road trips came the boom in roadside attractions, and South Dakota was one of the states that embraced these quirky roadside attractions, like this, an 80-foot dinosaur from Wall Drugs. As we continued to drive east on Interstate 90, we could see the Badlands in the distance. I've wanted to see this multi-million years old, uplifted, shallow seabed since I saw the movie poster for Terrence McNally's The Badlands. Even though the film wasn't shot nor even about the Badlands National Park, this place had reached a fantastic status in my mind, as some sort of fantasy of, I don't even know. In fact, even up to now, I don't know what to expect to see. I just love the idea that this part of the United States was once under seawater. I believe that this is the Kodak water tower. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. Leave a comment if you know more. Once we reached Oakoma, we knew that we were getting closer to the mighty Missouri River, which I think is pretty exciting. The Missouri River, as I learned in school, is the largest of the rivers in the United States. And this river is also the same river that Lewis and Clark used while they were traveling through the newly purchased land from the Louisiana Purchase. Oh, now look, there it is. You can see it in the distance. Now, isn't that a grand river? Hello, Missouri River. This was my first time ever seeing it, and I'm not gonna lie, I was excited. Once we crossed over this mighty Missouri River, we went through a drive-through called Taco John's in Chamberlain, which was on the east side of the river. And there I got some taco tater tots, super unhealthy and totally delicious. Also in Chamberlain, we stopped to look at a 50-foot stainless steel sculpture called The Dignity of Earth and Sky. The statue is a figure of a Native woman, and this was designed by a sculptor named Dale Lamphere, I think how you pronounce his name, and he designed it to honor the cultures of the Lakota and the Dakota people. The statue wears a garment patterned after traditional two-hide dress of the 1850s and holds an outstretched stars quilt, a symbol of respect, honor, and admiration. The quilt has 128 stainless steel diamonds that feature color-changing pieces that glitter in the sun and move with the wind. Of course, we had to stop and pose with the Missouri River showing behind us. It was another scorching hot day where the temperatures reached 104, but we braved the heat for our own iconic photograph to one day be found in the antique stores of the internet, unless I print them out, so they can be dusty and found in a box long after we're gone. So I'm pretty sure that I pronounced the capital city's name incorrectly. I believe I pronounced it Pierre, but doing a little research, I see that it's pronounced Pier, as in peer through the window, not Pierre, as in Peter. As we passed through Montrose, on a hill, we could see another roadside attraction called Porter Sculpture Park, a delightful random sculpture park on a hill. Minnesota. Woo! Minnesota. Land of corn, just like South Dakota. Minnesota sunset.
Left turn at the light, right?
Minnesota, the North Star State, whose capital is St. Paul and its highest peak is Eagle Mountain at 2,301 feet or 701 meters. The largest city is Minneapolis, the birthplace of Prince. And once we crossed the border into Minnesota, we continued on Interstate 90 until we reached Fairmount. And from there, we veered south onto Highway 15. We passed cornfields and sunflower fields that blurred past as the sun began to set. And then finally, as dusk was settling in, we rolled into the sleepy Iowa town of Sioux City. And it is there that we finally stopped for the night. I hope you enjoyed our drive through South Dakota. Like and subscribe to see the next one. Bye!